I'm really excited about the new Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I watched the trailer earlier.
Oh yeah? Wait, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, yeah,
Which Guardian of the Galaxy trailer are you talking about?
yeah. The one that just came out. The one with Chris Pine and.
That's Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh well,
Couldn't tell the difference.
looked like Guardians of the Galaxy to me. I don't know.
Yes. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. I was laughing too much. We're watching the trailer for Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. It's supposed to come out in 2023. So, Draugr, did you see the Black Dragon? It looked like it was spewing like some acid or something. I know you've done more Dungeons and Dragons than me.
Yeah, I'm only a slightly bigger nerd than you. It's yeah, the black dragons use like acid attacks. They don't breathe fire. I think that's the red and bronze dragons maybe both breathe fire. So
Okay.
yeah,
I thought that,
I'm pretty sure someone could fact check me on that.
yeah,
But
I think that was kind of interesting. This doesn't, the things that I noticed, it seemed like it wasn't just a copy of like Lord of the Rings type of thing, style of fantasy and stuff like that, which a lot of, I would say, movies and TV shows go often.
yeah, it doesn't look it's not really like a generic fantasy type thing. It actually looks sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, like with the creatures and the different classes and stuff. Things like like you brought up the black dragon and the gelatinous cube and the owl bear. Although I guess that was a druid turning into an owl bear. But yeah, they also have different classes as well. Like I think Chris Pine is supposed to be a bard, and Michelle Rodriguez is the barbarian. So that's interesting
I
too.
noticed that it appears that they're gonna do with just looking at her acts and everything. They're kind of also going with a little bit exaggeration on some of the things, possibly when it comes to, like, it's a fun thing like Guardians of the Galaxy, like you were saying, but also a
Hmm.
thing about like her acts. You remember seeing that looked kind of like it was like, I don't know, it was like had like fire. It was almost like really red hot. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
um what that was about. There was like a point in the, if she just picked up an axe like that, like is magically imbued or whatever. So that was
Hmm.
interesting. So just some things that seem like it's like kind of a little bit over exaggeration of from normal fantasy, which
Hmm.
I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean that's depending on how you do Dungeons and Dragons, because that's kind of up to the person running the game, the dungeon master. But the general idea, or what I tend to see in the D&D universe, because it has its own lore and that kind of stuff. Um, it's a lot more magical than other fantasy. It's definitely like a high fantasy with people able to turn into bears and owl bears and people having flaming glowing swords and stuff, which isn't always going to be the case with things like Lord of the Rings, like you brought up, is a little bit lower fantasy, really. Um, so it's a little bit more sorcery and a little bit less sword play. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of sword play, but I guess my point is and a lot of those type of things like Lord of the Rings, it's all about sword and shield kind of stuff, whereas this is actually has a lot of magic with it.
Yeah. Okay. So like, yeah, because when you watch, what do you call it? When you watch, like you said, Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, magic isn't overly used. So
Hmm.
I definitely seen quite a bit of magic, which is pretty cool. I think it
Yeah.
looks interesting in that respect. There's, like you said, there's like plenty of glowing swords and things.
Hmm.
I noticed there's a fight between different people in D&D. Is there like different factions already incorporated, like type of thing? Because it looked like some like more barbarian type of people versus some like imperial type of people type of thing at the beginning.
The little bit that I do know, a lot of the stuff. I mean, I would say 99% of my experience with the D&D universe is, or D&D in general, is me having to be the dungeon master, which I'm fine with most of the time. And I typically make my own world, which a lot of people do. They kind of take the basis that is D&D and go from there. So all of the different lore. I think I've read like one D&D book, but there are different factions to answer your question. I know there are people that are seen to be as like their empire and stuff is more evil, like the dark elves, or full orcs are typically seen as like a barbarian, type people that typically prey upon villages and that kind of thing. It depends on the game that you're running and playing in, but the actual lore of the D&D universe has several different kingdoms and factions and stories going on in it. So
Okay. I think there was quite a few. I don't know if you mentioned this yet, but different like mythical creatures and stuff like that that look like they were just they
mm-hmm.
weren't generic ones that you usually see, right?
Right.
So I think that seemed pretty cool. I think it looks pretty interesting. I'm excited for something that is different than the normal like same fantasy stuff over and over, same tropes type.
Yeah, it's. I kind of feel. I know there was a D&D movie back in 2000. I remember it vaguely. Um, it didn't really feel like anything super special or different as opposed to like a generic fantasy type story. Um, there's been a couple other D&D movies too, but I think they were both like direct to DVD things in the early 2000s, and I don't think I've even seen them. So I don't have a big opinion on them other than the fact that if they're direct to DVD, they're probably not the greatest quality, but
Mm-hmm. So I think then that like it looks. I think I seen one of the Dungeons and Dragons. I don't remember if it was the one from 2000 and the other one I think was from 2005 or 2003 or something like that. I don't remember
mm-hmm.
very great memories of it, but also it's been like too
Mm-hmm.
many years now. But yeah,
Yeah, it's been quite a
but
while
also
for me as
it
well.
wasn't that great that I remembered like things about it enough to be like, yep, that was a great movie. So I also think it probably didn't do that great. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I would.
It didn't. It was a flop. I looked up it was something like a $50 million budget, and they made like 30 million. So
Ouch. Yeah, that
so
sounds
yeah.
pretty bad. Um, yeah. So I think. Do you think it's worth a watch than this one, or do you think it's worth direct to DVD?
I mean, just from the trailer, it obviously looks pretty good, and I think that's the general consensus of people as well. As even different people that are a fan of D&D and fantasy seem to think that it has a good look to it, and I think it does have like a unique look as opposed to some other generic fantasy. Um, I don't want to say generic fantasy and then say like, oh, that's Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings is its own thing. Um, uh, in fact, I would say typically like Lord of the Rings is on like one end of the spectrum of fantasy, and D&D, while similar, has taken ideas and stuff from Lord of the Rings, just like most fantasy, and has sort of uh, gone way to the other end of like magic. So it's like I said before, it's a high fantasy sort of deal with lots of magic and tons of creatures and stuff, which I think is fine. It's totally fine to go in that direction and in a way that makes it a different kind of fun.
So you would say it's about as different as from Star Trek as from Warhammer.
Star Wars. Oh, Yeah, I suppose. But which Warhammer? Fantasy Warhammer
Well,
or
40K
40K?
because that's like Star Trek. There you
Yeah,
go. Uh,
I suppose so. But I mean, you could even say just Star Trek and Star Wars.
yeah.
Really, it's sort of a yeah.
I think that I think it looks great as someone who doesn't know too much about D&D and has only basically done role playing and a little bit. I think I think it looks cool as someone who enjoys fantasy type of stuff. So
Hmm.
I'm optimistic, but I hopefully
Yeah.
optimistic. I because I do have concerns that it could be just a total like flop because trailer looked good and then it's
Oh,
just like
sure.
execution was terrible. But I look forward to it. They have a
It
whole
could
year
be.
to figure it out. I'm surprised they actually released the trailer a year early almost. It's probably half a year early,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I think it looks good. I think it'll probably be worth a watch. They, like we already mentioned, they definitely took some inspiration from the sort of uh, Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, rogues gallery, people of assembling a team, which in a lot of D&D games, that's typically how you put together a party. It's not necessarily like always like people that know each other. It might be one or two people with a shared history, and then they pick up these other randos that work with them. So um, I think in that way it looks very true to its roots. So I think that it could be a good representation of actually playing the game. So I think that's good. I think that's a good way to go about it, and try instead of trying to, turn it into something different, stick to what people actually like about D&D,
yeah,
which has gotten more popular in the past 10 or 20 years for various
yeah,
reasons.
I think that's true. I think that's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I say we yeah. Got anything else to add?
that's about
All right.
it.
So thank you for listening to a quick review on Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Come back again to watch our next project.